Hello, everyone, and welcome to the June edition of the Seekers Forum. I hope you're having a great weekend. And let's say hi to Jay Cobley. How are you, Jay?
Hello, Mark. It's good to see you.
Great to see you, too. This month, we're looking at play and how the power of play and playfulness help to loosen the stranglehold of the overserious ego and give us access to qualities in our childlike nature that we can't always reach in other ways. The virtues that come with playfulness are often associated with the qualities that spiritual seekers rely on the path of awakening, as you're going to see. Now, just as our culture tends to devalue those virtues that are associated with spirituality in favor of those linked to materialism, competition, and external success, the gifts of playfulness are often downplayed in favor of so-called grown-up characteristics. Our cultural distrust of playfulness and childishness are part of the legacy of our Puritan forebears, who believed that work was the key to success, not play, and that labor is how we glorify God. According to this kind of moralism, playfulness is considered a threat not only to our success, but also to our salvation. This Puritan view is contradicted, however, by science and scientific research. Studies show that as modern adults, we suffer from an excess of somberness. And this adult play deficit, as it's called, is actually becoming a public health crisis as the world becomes more complex and dangerous. In the words of one psychiatrist and play researcher, the opposite of play isn't work, the opposite of play is depression. The deleterious effects of over-seriousness are apparent all around us. Social norms restrain our urge to let loose, and playfulness as an adult way of being remains deeply stigmatized in our society. We're afraid of appearing irresponsible and don't want to be viewed as childish. And isn't it interesting that being called childish is a put-down in our culture? But in fact, play and playfulness are far more than frivolous indulgence. They're actually hardwired aspects of psychological development that play a key role in a healthy and a balanced life. Play is essential to brain development, and this impact begins in early childhood. Time spent on the playground is generally understood to be at least as important as time spent in the classroom. Play teaches children empathy, flexibility, and communication skills. It also gives kids a context in which to act out aggression, competitiveness, and impulsivity in a risk-free environment. In addition to being fun, play exercises the brain's flexibility and teaches us resilience as well, reducing stress, shifting perspective, restoring optimism, encouraging bonding with others, as well as stimulating our creativity. Play also deepens intimacy and helps to loosen the bonds between people. There are ways that you can be with people in play that you can't always be in other contexts. And most of us know that this is true. I can remember playing cards with my mother when I was a young man. Some friends and I had a weekly poker game, and we started to invite my antisocial, not particularly cheerful mother to these games. And even though she and I were never close, when we were playing cards, we were able to relax together. We could laugh and tease each other and enjoy each other's company without the usual tension. I was able to see a side of my mother that I never saw otherwise when we were playing poker, and these are some of the happiest memories that I have of our time together. Play is also linked to improving skills that we need in order to help us get better at life. Studies show that animals tend to play at things that they'll be doing during their adult lives in order to survive. Predatory animals play at predation, and those that are preyed upon tend to play at escape. Social animals, like ourselves, beat each other up to establish rank and hierarchy. Humans and other mammals play at sex as well. While other animals play at mounting one another, humans play doctor and act out complex sexual rituals through dating, flirtation, and other behaviors. Many volumes have been written about the link between sex and play. And most people who've ever been in an erotic relationship will tell you that playfulness is rarely a bad thing when it comes to intimacy and sexual connection. It helps to lower the walls between people and also prevents us from taking ourselves and sexuality itself too seriously. Just as we've selectively bred the wolf into the dog specifically for playfulness, we've also bred playfulness into ourselves and our mating rituals through sexual selection. Males show that they're not dangerous to females or to their children through their willingness to play with them. Heterosexual men often find playfulness in a woman very attractive, a sign of fitness and stamina, as well as grounds for emotional and physical attraction. So what do we mean by play exactly? How is play different from the other things that we do? Simply put, play is something that we do for the pleasure of it. As one researcher put it, it's voluntary, it's pleasurable, it provides a sense of engagement, it takes you out of time, and the act itself is more important than the outcome. Those are the primary criteria. It's voluntary, pleasurable, provides this sense of engagement, takes us out of time, and the act itself is more important than the outcome. What's more, play is a highly personal thing. Your idea of a good time might be the next guy's idea of torture. In myriad ways, play is related to our core sense of self. It reveals what we choose to do, not what we have to do. And we all have different styles of play. Some folks enjoy testing their physical skill, others prefer games of strategy like chess. There are other people who play by doing word games and puzzles, and others who enjoy practical jokes or simply behaving in silly ways. Unfortunately, the decline of play and playfulness and our overemphasis on adulthood is having terrible consequences regarding how we live as well as how we progress on the spiritual path. Because spiritual awakening is, after all, a process of unknowing, of becoming beginners, of trusting in forces greater than we are, taking risks, and remembering that life itself is a kind of play. These are all childlike qualities that are associated not only with playfulness, but with spiritual awakening as well. In Vedanta, they have the concept of lila, the play of consciousness, and describe creation as a great cosmic meeting of Shakti and Shiva, the female energy and the male principle, which come together to engender the universe through their delight. It's through play that the cosmos is created. And of course, we act out this divine play in our daily lives as well, using the masculine and the feminine parts of ourselves. We learn to interplay with how we meet our moment-to-moment experience. And that's why it's so important to ask ourselves if there's enough curiosity, levity, and imagination in how we meet the conditions of our lives. That really is the point. Do we cooperate with this lila, with this play of consciousness, and allow ourselves to enjoy the conditions and the changes that come our way? Or do we stand against reality, planting our feet like obstinate adults and saying no to things as they are? This egotistical stance is damaging, and as it turns out, it's relatively new in how human beings live. Adultism, as it's called, is largely a byproduct of capitalism, anthropocentrism, and greed. Our hunter-gatherer ancestors were apparently far more playful than we are, according to anthropologists. They're often described as good-humored, always laughing, joyful. As one researcher puts it, what we would call work, hunting and gathering, was fun for them. It was interesting, skilled, varied work. Not one of these hunter-gatherer tribes had a word for toil or drudgery. That seems to be because we, as humans, tend to enjoy doing many of the things that are necessary for our survival. We like to eat. We like to drink. We like to take care of cute little children. It's only when humans began planting crops that we started to get into trouble. Plowing fields and milling flour are strenuous, repetitive, and boring. And then we invented factories and lost sight of play entirely. So our job today, collectively speaking, is to regain the power of play, which is increasingly important as the world becomes more dangerous and difficult. As tempting as it is to spiral into seriousness, that's exactly the opposite of what we need to do. We need more delight, more levity, more teamwork, vision, and vigor in how we approach our lives and the world. We need to remember that life itself is a play and to not take ourselves so seriously. It's incumbent on us, as seekers in particular, to remember that, as Shakespeare wrote, all the world's a stage and the men and women only players. That doesn't imply that we cease to care or take things seriously enough. Not at all. Instead, this attitude assists us in remembering the nature of our experience and what is actually going on here. Because the ego and its travails are migratory, momentary. They're passing into the space from which they emerged, more dreamlike than solid. That's the truth. The play instinct reminds us of that. And when we can bring it into our spiritual practice, it also revivifies our minds and our spirits. For example, when you're sitting in meditation, your mind can become a kind of wonderland, a kaleidoscope of colors and shapes and thoughts flowing before you in a torrent of awareness. The observing mind can then enjoy this interaction, recognizing the thoughts as thoughts and the thinker behind them who appears to be thinking them as an illusion, as an idea, and distinct from the contents of consciousness. This helps to create a playful interaction between the witness and the witnessed, the storyteller and the story. It infuses us with awareness, and it also helps to free us of identification and provides a kind of buoyancy that makes sitting practice a lot more interesting. Or take writing as a spiritual practice. When the play faculty is engaged in writing, all sorts of interesting things start to happen. You ask yourself questions and get surprising answers when you sit long enough to explore your own mind and heart and soul. Writing awakens the brave, determined part of oneself, the courageous spirit of the seeker that wants self-knowledge and freedom and happiness. If you think of your writing as a form of play, whether you're forming the words with your pen or banging them out on a keyboard, the activity of writing engages you much more fully. Playing with questions becomes your greatest satisfaction, a game, knowing that each question is a key to some form of truth. Questions such as, who do you think you are? What would you do if you were free? If love were in control, what would you do? And what do you fear that you also desire? These kinds of writing koans open the mind. The desire for knowledge drives the writing, the way a ball bouncing down a field drives the player to run and kick it. If you use questions as fuel for your seeking, you will never run out of gas on the path. So ask yourself, what are the questions that you need to play with today? If life were a game and you were a player, where is the ball of self-knowledge bouncing? What do you need to understand? And most of all, where do you take yourself too seriously? Because these are the areas in you where playfulness is needed most, the places where you hold too tightly and feel the most fear. This is where the knots form in the psyche and the body and become obstacles to flexibility as well as to freedom. Luckily, we have the power to loosen these knots in ourselves by learning to laugh at our own foibles and remembering that we are, just like everybody else, utterly ridiculous. That's the good news. To be human is to be absurd. This is true for all of us. From a certain perspective, we couldn't be funnier. Just think about it. We're hilarious combinations of contradictions, utterly paradoxical, pretending to be in control of things over which we have no control, and forgetting our utter vulnerability in favor of stories that the mind tells about who we are, even though that identity is a composed fiction. Now, through one lens, this situation can appear tragic, and it does to many people. But through another, there is nothing to do but laugh. And that goes to the heart of the wisdom of play and why we need it in our emotional repertoire. It connects us to the truth. There's a reason that the fool is the wisest person in many Shakespeare plays, the one who isn't taken in by conventional wisdom, but is able to satirize from the margins. At the end of the day, seriousness is limited, but the ability to see through seriousness is not. And that's how play and delight and satire, the ability to make fun of ourselves, is the part of the path of awakening. To play the holy fool, to be able to deconstruct the arrogant fictions of ourselves and others in order to be free of hypocrisy. This is an unlimited source of potential wisdom in us. To increase this spiritual virtue, which is really discernment in the garb of laughter, is an ongoing practice of taking ourselves down a peg, not in the sense of self-diminishment or self-criticism, but as a helpful reality check, a way of remembering to laugh at our own arrogance and our pride and our false sense of control. Not in a voice of recrimination, but in the loving way that a mother might laugh at the antics of her child. We learn to become amused by our own childishness and the ways that we pretend to be bigger than we are. And this helps to remind us of our true proportion, to be humbled, to be relieved not to be in control, and to remember that play is part of how we leaven the ego and we stay sane in a situation where sanity is often a challenge. So that's what I wanted to say to you today about play and playfulness. And now we'll move into our writing exercise. Folks, I'd like you now, please, to take 20 minutes to write about in what parts of your own life today do you take yourself too seriously? Where do you take yourself too seriously? And how could being more playful actually help you? Be as specific as you can be, please. We'll take 20 minutes to do that, and then we'll come back together as a group.